a pretty good understanding of where ESXi fits into the virtualization world. Give you kind of a sense for what it does, where it fits into different products that we offer. But what I really want to spend most of the time on today is doing more of a walkthrough of the product. Hopefully you're convinced to some extent that you're interested in virtualization or you're interested in VMware ESXi, and what you're really looking for is more information on how to actually go and get started. So that's the focus of the rest of the presentation. So let's start from the beginning. We'll just start from the beginning and kind of walk through this. And start with the question of kind of what hardware does VMware recommend. So if you're looking to go deploy ESXi, first thing obviously you should go and do is look at our hardware compatibility list and look for a server system that matches up against that compatibility list. That'll be a supported system. Now, it's true that ESXi will work on a lot of systems that are not on our supported HCL, but if you want to have confidence that if you have support issues, those can get resolved, obviously the hardware compatibility list or the HCL is the way to go. But when you look at that server, in terms of configuring it, you think about the CPU. Yes, we can run on a single socket. We can run on a single socket dual core system. But really, ideally, you want to have a dual socket system or more. You really want to have 4 cores on each one of those CPUs. Because really, at the end of the day, more cores means more virtual machines. You get higher consolidation ratios by running with more cores within your system. Likewise, with memory, again, our minimum requirement is 1 gigabyte of memory. But really, ideally, you'd want to kind of scale up the memory in the physical system. 8 gigs or more is kind of a common configuration that we see. And again, this means more memory means that you can install more virtual machines on that system. And you think about it, what you end up with is probably a more richly configured server here than maybe what you're executing some of your applications on today. But you can run a lot more applications, a lot more virtual machines on this, and ultimately dramatically reduce your hardware requirements in total. Then for the network, again, the minimum requirement is 1 NIC, including, and you can even share that with the management interface. But really, ideally, you'd have 1 NIC for the management interface plus additional network cards for the virtual machines themselves. So we're talking about a couple NICs. Because really, again, think about it, you have many applications sitting on top of a single server, and many of those are going to be trying to access the network. You want to minimize bottlenecks, and to minimize bottlenecks, you have multiple pathways for those virtual machines to go and reach the network. And then on storage, so there's kind of 2 ways to go here. You can either look to run your virtual machines on local storage, or you can actually use shared storage as well. We include support within ESXi for NFS, for iSCSI, and for Fiber Channel within what we call our VMware file system or VMFS. It's a cluster file system, and it's actually very easy for multiple ESXi hosts to access and look at the same virtual machine, the same storage locations. But if you're going to use local storage, the absolute minimum requirement is 1 80 gig drive. But really, ideally, you'd have 2 mirror drives for running the ESXi installable image if you're going to install this on a hard drive, plus 4 drive rated in a RAID 5 configuration for the virtual machines themselves. You want a solid amount of storage. Virtual machines do tend to be fairly large, as these are, again, full operating system and application stacks. But a more common deployment scenario is to actually use shared storage. And in this case, you really just need the local disk for the ESXi installable image, for the actual hypervisor image, which tends to be very small. And then you have all your virtual machine storage on the shared storage itself. And actually, if you're going to install or run the ESXi embedded image, meaning you purchased ESXi with your system, with your HP, IBM, or Dell system, then you could actually run the server itself in a diskless configuration, run the hypervisor off the embedded USB or flash component, and then have all your virtual machines on the shared storage instead. Which brings me actually to kind of the very next question. So we have our hardware configuration all set up. Now, how do I go install this? There's actually 2 ways to go and get the ESXi image. On the left-hand side, you have the route to market that we've been pursuing for the last 7 months or so, which is called the ESXi Embedded. This is, again, where we've worked with all of our OEM server partners to integrate ESXi as essentially a hardware component into physical servers, meaning we used an SD flash card or USB key internal to the server to place the image and then distributed that with a new server. So that means there's really no installation involved. You just have, as long as the server is configured to boot from that device, you just turn on the server, boots into the hypervisor, and is ready to go be configured and run virtual machines. So that's a very common scenario and one that many customers have been pursuing for the last few months. On the right-hand side is kind of the primary route if you're going to come to VMware.com and download our image from our website. This is where you'll download our image, burn a CD with that ISO image, and then take that CD and then kind of just install from that CD. It's a very simple two-step process. You accept the end-user license agreement, and then you select which local drive you want it to install on. It goes and installs in a couple minutes, and that's it. So again, very little configuration required. It's a very straightforward, simple process. And so once you've installed ESXi, the next thing to do is to go and get the system itself configured. And there's really only a couple things you need to do. The first thing is once you power on the system, and once with the hypervisor installed, it boots into the hypervisor, and you'll see this screen marked number 1 right here. It looks very much like this. That's kind of the main boot up screen. You hit F2. That takes you into the configuration menu, and that's where you can go. And first thing you want to do is configure your administrator password. So you go select that option, configure that, and that takes about 20 seconds. And then optionally, you may want to choose the option there called Configure Management Network. So in doing that, the default is DHCP for ESXi, but you can certainly go in and modify network configuration to give it a static IP address if you choose. So that's an optional step. And the next thing you do is you want to actually then start managing the system. At this point, it's configured, it's ready to run, and now you just need to get the virtual infrastructure client up and ready to point to it. And the way you do that, it's actually not really shown very clearly on this slide, but what you want to do is go to a web browser, go to Firefox or to Internet Explorer, and type in the IP address of your ESXi host. Type it into the web browser. It'll take you to what we call a welcome page. And on that welcome page, there'll be a lot of information and some different things you can go and do. But the key thing you want to do in the starting point is to download and install the Windows-based VI client. So there's a link there for the VI client. You just click that link, download the image. It's a basic Windows package, and then you install that on a Windows system. It could be a laptop. It could be a desktop. It doesn't matter. It's really just your GUI interface. Install that software, get it up and running, and as soon as you start the VI client, then you want to type in again the IP address of that into that little window there marked number 4. Type in the username and password you configured up above, and then that takes you into the system. You're now ready to go and start managing and running virtual machines.